Namaskar and a very warm welcome to everyone joined in today on our 53rd Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. This talk is being organized by the Central Zoo Authority, New Delhi, as part of the ongoing Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Mahotsav is a 7-long celebration to commemorate 75 years of India's independence, which falls on the 15th of August 2022. The Central Zoo Authority is taking the celebration forward through a massive outreach campaign entitled Conservation to Coexistence, the People Connect. Under the helm of this campaign, we will be showcasing 75 conservation priority species and 75 zoos, highlighting one species and one zoo each week. We are currently in week 53 of this celebration, with the greater one-horned rhino as the species in focus and the Center for Wildlife Rehabilitation and Conservation as the zoo in focus. So joined in today to speak to us on this species is Dr. Bibhav Talukdar, who is the Secretary General and the Chief Executive Officer of RNF. He's one of the founding members of RNF, which is a leading wildlife NGO based in Guwahati, and is a senior advisor to the International Rhino Foundation for Asian Rhinos. He is also the chair of the IUCN SSE Asian Rhino Specialist Group and has been actively involved with the Indian Rhino Vision 2020 program. He has been looking after the conservation of the species and its associated habitat for over 3 decades now and will speak to us more on the species in focus. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Okay, very good afternoon. And I'll be speaking about the greater one-horned rhino, which is also the state, animal of Assam, a province which is located in the northeast part of India. So before talking about the greater one-horned rhino, I'm just, flagging the existence of the 5 species of rhinos in the world, 2 species in Africa and 3 species in Asia. The height-wise, the greater one-horn is the highest, from the height-wise, and the shortest is the Sumatran rhinos. The white rhinos follows the greater one-horn, followed by black rhinos, Javan rhinos, and then the Sumatran rhinos. So if we see the current population of the white rhinos, which are found in the countries mentioned on the right side, the population is in between 17,500 to 18,900. In past few years, the white rhino population has little bit declined because increase in poaching in African continent. The black rhino population is about 5,400. It's marginally increasing, and the countries where it is found in Africa is being reflected on the right side. Now, the Javan rhino, which is now only found in one national park in Indonesia, its current population is 72 to 74. This is also known as the lesser one-horned rhino. And almost, the body looks like the greater one-horn. However, the habitats are different. They are basically the browsers, and they live in dense forests. Whereas the greater one-horn rhino, which is found in India and Nepal, they're mainly grassland-dependent species, and they are grazers. Sumatran rhino is the only Asian rhino species which is found, at this moment only in Indonesia in the wild. This is a rhino which are having 2 horns. We all know that 2 species found in Africa are having 2 horns, but in Asia, the Sumatran rhinos are having 2 horns, and its population is declining very fast, and it is less than 80. Again, we are not sure whether it is 80, 70, 60, 40, or 30, but definitely this is a species facing, a great, wider threats from different factors. Now, greater one-horned rhino, the population is fortunately increasing both in India and Nepal. And this is one of the species which has been downlisted from IUCN Red List in 2008. Prior to 2008, the species was enlisted as endangered. However, in 2008, when the rate list assessment team assessed the overall status of the species based on the standard criteria, it has been downlisted from endangered to vulnerable. The word downlisted, however, sometimes looks like is as if it has been downgraded. But if we see from conservation point of view, it reflects the success. It reflects that the conservation initiatives or measures taken by our governments, the cooperations that the local people has put forward, that those combined effort has given a positive results, leading to the downlisting of the greater one-horn rhinos from endangered to vulnerable. I think our common goal in next 10 years should be try to improve again the overall situations of the status of the greater one-horn rhino and probably further downlist from vulnerable to near threatened. Now, if I am basically concentrating the populations of the greater one-horn rhino, in 1980s, the Kaziranga was having about 1,000 rhinos, and in 2018, the population has increased to 2,413. In fact, from 25th of till 27th of March, the Assam government is again re-estimating the rhino population in Kaziranga National Park. I'm sure the 22 figures will be again different than what it is 2018. Orang National Park, we had 60, then it came down to 46. This 46 is because of intense poaching during 5-6 years period. But again, when the protection has been ensured, the overall population has increased. Povitoria Wildlife Sanctuary, this is one of the smallest sanctuary in Assam, and where we have highest density of rhinos. We have 102 at this moment as per estimation in 2018. Manas National Park, we had 50 to 60. Then in between, we lost all the rhino populations. But later on, again, because the situation has improved under Indian Rhino Vision 2020, rhinos has been reintroduced. So I will talk about the IRB 2020 a little later. Laukha Wildlife Sanctuary, again in Assam, we had about 50 to 70 rhinos. We lost all of them. The main reason for we lost the rhinos from Manas and Laukha is because of the prolonged socio-political unrest. When I say prolonged, it is not like 1 week or 2 weeks or 1 month or few months. It is for years. So when the socio-political unrest lasts for years, we have seen the well-organized gang of poachers targets the rhinos. And that is the reason why we lost the rhinos from Manas National Park and Laukha Wildlife Sanctuaries. Jaldapara Wildlife Sanctuary and Gorumara is in West Bengal. From very small populations, you can see the populations are increasing. In fact, the Jaldapara population is now the second largest population in India after Kaziranga. Dudhwa National Park also started with a very small populations, and now we are having close to 38. Then Chitwan, Bordia, Suklafanta, and Parsa is from Nepal. Let us see, the Chitwan population during 1980s was 300. It increased to 544. Then 2009, it decreased to 435. Bordia National Park in 2000, we had 104. Then it again declined to 20. The reason is same, almost similar to what was happened to Manas and Laukha. During 2000, those years, the Nepal was also facing, the prolonged socio-political unrest, which popularly known as the Maoist, issues. And during those, the socio-political unrest, the enforcement agencies basically, their priority changes towards the national security. And again, the well-organized gang of poachers targets the rhino. So we had three such, incidences for greater one-horn rhinos, which are related to prolonged socio-political unrest and, increase of poaching. And in some cases like Manas and Laukha, it is the total extermination of the rhino populations. But the good thing is that once the protection is ensured, whether we have seen in India and we have also seen in Nepal, the rhino populations keeps growing. So that means, the greater one-horn rhinos in the wild has no major issues with regards to breeding. One of the major threats comes from the poaching, and that is where the priorities has to be always there. The rhino will always be a protection dependent species, and protections cannot be compromised with regards to rhino conservation. This is where the rhinos are distributed. In Assam, we have in 4 protected areas, West Bengal in 2 protected areas, Uttar Pradesh we have in 1 protected areas, and in Nepal we have 4. So together, this whole distribution range at this moment is having almost 3,700 plus greater one horned rhinos. Sorry. Now, why rhinos are being killed? We all know it is being killed because of its horn, because there are beliefs in some countries, where the rhino horns are used, that it may have some medicinal properties, it may have some other properties. But so far, uh, the consumptions are restricted to few countries for which the demands are there. Fortunately, India doesn't use the rhino horns in that quantum, and because of the increase in awareness, and it is illegal also to keep. So, but the major user countries are basically the China, Taiwan, uh, to some extent Thailand. Vietnam is becoming an emerging markets, and because of this demands in those countries, rhinos are targeted for its horn. And because of late we have seen the Vietnam market has increased for many reasons. That is why the demands are more. Uh, the demands sometimes are probably fulfilled, from killing the rhinos in Africa. At this moment, I feel that in India, Nepal, rhino poaching has been controlled to some extent, but we cannot, afford to be complacent, because at any time, that pressures can shift from Africa to India or Nepal, for which we have to be ever prepared. If we see the poaching scenarios in African continent, if we see 2007 figures, it was very less. 2008, 2009, 2011, it has slowly increased. But 2013 to 2017, you can see that average rhino poaching in African continent is more than 1,000. More than 1,000 means every day there are 3 rhino being poached. So that is the pressure that this well-organized gang of rhino poachers and animal smugglers can put on. There are countries like Kenya, South Africa. They also have even helicopters for protections, despite having the fastest moving transport system. The poachers can still kill over 1,000 rhinos a year in the African continent. So this is because this is a well-organized crime. This is not an opportunistic crime. So that is why we need to understand it has to be one of the topmost priorities, not only for the forest and wildlife officials, but I think the protections, vigilance has to be one of the top priorities of all the enforcement agencies in the country. Because there are demands and we could hardly do in those countries. What we could do in our countries is basically increase the efficacy of our intelligence gathering network, increase the efficacy of law enforcement, and increase the efficacy to get the culprits convicted. So those are the approach that we all need to focus in. If we see the rhino poaching scenarios in Assam, in 1980s, it was quite high. Then it came down. Again in 2013, it went up. But then you can see because of the proactive measures taken by the Assam government, where the government has taken some timely steps. Last year, throughout Assam, the poaching was 1. So it's a great success. From 1, it can come to 0. It cannot go to minus. So this is a fluctuating things, but one thing is very evident that if the enforcement agencies, give their full energy, as long as it becomes the priorities, I think, this rhino poaching can be controlled. We may not be able to control always at 1 or 0. Sometimes it may increase, but the effort has to be there. If we can make efforts, we have already seen the results. Why rhino poaching bothers us? Because it can impact the rhino populations, especially small populations. You know, it also impacts the morale of the frontline forest guard because the frontline forest guard with limited facilities, they are trying their level best. If I see reflect last year, out of 365 days, 364 days they were successful, no poaching. Only one day there was the poaching. But then, when poaching takes place, most of the time, the media, the other agencies, the people, the public starts blaming the frontline staff. So that ultimately demoralizes their morale. So that needs to be addressed. Impact on overall conservation if rhino poaching increases, but overall, we have seen it also put pressures on the police. But most recently, what we have seen in last 10 years, based on the investigations done by different enforcement agencies, it has also have severe impact on the national security. There are some investigations being done by enforcement agencies where it is quite clear that rhino horns were also being exchanged in lieu of illegal arms. Because for some countries it is a win-win situations where rhino horns are being used. So rhino horns give those countries wants the rhino horns and sends illegal arms to our country to destabilize the nation. So that is where the national security issues are involved. Because nowadays we have also seen, the poachers are coming with sophisticated weapons. And sophisticated weapons, the normal village level poachers cannot access. That is why, the rhino poaching in that matters with the wildlife trading has a diverse impact on the nations and especially on its security system. Nowhere rhinos are safe or the horns are safe. Even from European museums, over 90 horns were stolen during 2011 to 2015. So when we talk about Europe, we think that their protection system, the vigilance system is good. Yes, the vigilance system is good, but the international gang of poachers, they are also having intelligent people probably in their hand. And they are also thinking their level best, how their operations can be successful. So when they found that killing rhinos in protected areas is becoming more and more challenging, they have concentrated on taking away the rhino horns which were stored in museums. So they are shifting. They are also doing their own strategy in order to fill the need of those rhino horns in illegal international market. What we are doing as an NGO, we are trying to complement or supplement the effort of the government. We trained up some sniffer dog and provided to the rhino bearing areas for use. And sniffer dogs has given some vital clues from scene of crime investigations. So in that way, as an NGO, we are trying to complement the effort of the rhino bearing areas and the governments. We are also working as a bridge, engaging police, and in Assam we have village defense, patrol parties. So the mandate of village defense patrol parties is basically to keep, the village crime free. The rhino poaching or wildlife poaching may not be in their, highest priorities, but we have, with involvement of police and forest officers, we have tried to garner their support by providing them some field gears, for using which, they can deliver their duties more efficiently. Working in villages are very important because that is where the information flows comes. We bring the forest officials, police officials to interact with the villages, and in that way a bridge is created. The flow of information system is being facilitated, and I think with all this, and then also engaging students, the students who are close to rhino bearing areas. We need to engage them so that they feel, the feel-good factors with regards to rhino conservations. Fortunately, rhino is a state animal of Assam. Every Assamese people is proud of having rhinos. So that is an advantage that we need to consolidate to garner local support because that is very important. Now, while poaching has been a threat that is visible, but there are other threats like the degradation of habitat. We have seen the grassland habitats in few areas are overshadowed by some alien invasive species. So habitat management is also equally important in the context of that the rhino populations are increasing. Areas more or less remain the same. Fortunately, the Kaziranga area has been expanded in last 1.5 years with almost 10 addition, 10 more additions. Of course, not all the 10 additions habitats are suitable for rhinos, but at least the effort to increase, the area of Kaziranga has been affected. But then we need to work on the habitat management so as to arrest, the spread of alien invasive species, because that may ultimately pose another greater threats to rhinos. Flood is an annual phenomenon, and let us remember that the greater one-horned rhinos is a floodplain animals. Okay, so every flood in Kaziranga, it energizes the ecosystems. Yes, sometimes we lose less, like probably animals. Sometimes because of high flood we may lose more animals, but I think in the floodplain ecosystem that management has to be, very careful interventions are needed based on scientific inputs. We have the remote sensing and GIS. Sometimes the media may focus in a way as if the whole Kaziranga is under flood. But if we use, the satellite imageries, we will probably get to know that even in the highest flood, probably around close to 80%, is under water, but it's still, within the national park, there may be some highland, natural highland areas where the animals can stay. So I think that's an aspect. The hydrology, the floodplain ecology has to be understood in order to secure the habitat, to protect, to conserve the rhinos in years to come. We had, two situations where rhinos gone but land exists. And those two scenarios are from Laukha Wildlife Sanctuaries and Manas. We lost rhinos, but land remains. As long as land remains, there is a possibility to play the second innings. And that is what actually the Assam government started in 2005 by, initiating the Indian Rhino Vision 2020. In 2008, the rhino, capture and translocation started. Initially from Povitoria and then from Kaziranga. Overall 22 rhinos were captured and translocated to Manas National Park, where it has been released. And now the current population rhinos in Manas National Park is close to 47. And some of the rhinos were also released from the rescue centers, and I'm sure my friend Dr. Bhaskar Chaudhary will speak about that a little later. Why we are doing this? We are doing this to provide justice to our future generations. These little kids has also the equal right to see rhinos alive, to see the rhino habitats or in that matter, the forest, wetlands alive. So for that, we need to work, whatever capacity we have, to ensure that whatever wildlife, whatever habitats, whatever, the ecological benefits we are getting, the future generations can also can get those benefits. And for that, working with students are very crucial because they are the future of any country. So inculcating in their minds love for wildlife, love for rhinos are very crucial. And that is why, a lot of engagement of students programs are being done with a combined, effort of the rhino bearing areas, the forest officials, NGOs, and school authorities. And, the students are being oriented with regards to the need for rhino conservations, with regards to their support for conservations and their ability to spread the message for rhino conservation. We have also started working with the police, district police. We have, like half-day workshops on the legal matters, especially on the Wildlife Protection Act, and those are becoming very helpful because a lot of time we also, receive some support, they need with regards to identifications of wildlife materials. We are also working closely with Wildlife Crime Control Bureau of India and, work closely with the other paramilitary forces in Assam to spread the message of wildlife conservations and their ability to check the wildlife crime. We are also working with judiciaries because convictions are very important. So we had, a few workshops, engaging the judges from the Guwahati High Court and also the district level judges of the Chief Judicial Magistrate or district and session judges, by bringing, these wildlife issues in their forefront so that, judiciary can play their role proactively. In last 22nd of September, Assam government has burned about 24 rhino stock, rhino horn, which were in the stockpile in Assam, spreading a strong signal that, rhino horns has no medicinal values. So the rhino horns are best fitted on the head of the rhinos when it is alive. So thank you very much for your kind attention.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for giving an overview of on the conservation status of the rhinos and the different community outreach activities that are being undertaken for preserving the species and safeguarding it. We will take question answers for this session at the end. We now move on to the second part of today's talk, which is on Know Your Zoo. So joining today to speak to us on the zoo is Dr. Bhaskar Chaudhary, who is the head of rescue and a wildlife veterinarian at the Wildlife Trust of India. He has worked for over 2 decades in the protected areas of Assam, Uttarakhand, and Chhattisgarh. And his work has predominantly been on wildlife rehabilitation of diverse species and taxa. He's a member of the IUCN SSC Asian Elephant Specialist Group, the IUCN SSC Asian Rhino Specialist Group, and captive elephant healthcare and management of the Project Elephant, the Government of India initiative. He will speak to us today more on the role of the Center for Wildlife Rehabilitation and Conservation and the way forward for the conservation of the greater one-horned rhino. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arundhati, for the introduction. I'm Bhaskar Chaudhary. I work for an NGO, Wildlife Trust of India. My last 21 years or so, we have been working on wildlife rehabilitation, specifically in the northeast part of Assam. My talk will be largely on the role that CWRC has played on the rehabilitation of rescued one-horn rhinoceros calves during the natural or man-made calamities, and whether we are successful or not. My talk will take you through that. Let me share my slides. Can you all see my slides?
Yes, it's visible. Please just put it in the PowerPoint, the presentation note.
Okay. So yeah, so the place where we do these works is the Center for Wildlife Rehabilitation and Conservation. It is CWRC. It is situated in the state of Assam, in just next to the famous Kaziranga National Park. A detailed talk given by my previous speaker, Dr. Bibhav Talukdar, talked about the rhino conservation history of Kaziranga and how Kaziranga has managed to be one of the icons of saving the species from nearly extinct in the early 1900s. So as he said, flood is a natural phenomenon. Kaziranga is actually been a product of the largest river Brahmaputra. It's in the floodplains of Brahmaputra, the Kaziranga National Park. But there is an apprehension that since 1950, when we had a massive earthquake in the northeast part of India, there is gradual sedimentation, and also the floods have become an annual phenomena in the landscape. So as you can see in the landscape, this is the plains. The cursor is in the floodplain, and there it is the gradual slope and hills. And the national highway, the yellow line is the national highway number 37, which cuts through the landscape. Flood is an essential evil, but when the impact of flood is huge, when 70 to 80% of the total area of the park is submerged by floods, we lose a lot of animals. Like in 1988, we had a devastating flood, killing about 40 odd rhinos, or 23 of them were calves, 1,000 hog deers mostly. Then we had uh, uh, another spell of flood in 1998. You can see on the screen on the right the levels of flood, and that's me standing in the place. You can well imagine the kind of inundation in the park during these floods. So during these floods, actually, when we lose such a lot of animals, there were a thought process that whether some of these animals, flood is a natural phenomena, we know, but some of these animals which are young, which are very healthy, can these be saved by timely veterinary intervention? And that is the birth of the very idea of a rehab center for these animals, especially during flood. So we started, as you know, the floods are a natural phenomena, and animals do migrate towards the hills on the south. But there are a lot of disturbances that we have created over the years, and one of them is the national highway. The others are the human encroachments or human settlements along the southern boundary of the park. So these free migrations from the floodplains to the nearby hills has been hampered for a long period of time. So we started with a animal ambulance to help distressed animals during flood. And in the year 2001, we started the MOU with the government of Assam for establishing a rehab facility for these animals. And thereby, in 2002 August, we inaugurated the CWRC and formally started working for wildlife rehabilitation in Assam. The figures here indicates that as we grow, the number of animals have started coming. You can see there's a increasing trend. So as I speak today, till today, we have handled more than 6,800 animals in our rehab facility. And out of that, we have managed to release about 55 to 60% of these animals till today. So these peaks that you see in the graph are the floods affected years. It is 2008, 2009, 2009, 2010, 2013, 14. So these are the peaks that we had really bad flood in Kaziranga, where a lot of mortalities or a lot of animals been admitted in our center. We have also equally managed to release at least 60% of these animals back to the wild. If we look at the kind of animals that we handle, you can see at least 259 species of animals that we have handled. So it gives us an immense opportunity to actually learn hands-on with these diverse kind of species. And that's an opportunity that is unique for our country. Coming back to the species on focus. So what actually we are doing with the rescued greater one-horned rhinoceros? The figures are in your slide. We have handled so far 54 such orphan or displaced rhino calves. Most of them, they come during the floods, but in winters also we get a lot of calves due to failed predation. Now these are all natural phenomena, but the problem is we have most of the rhino population in Assam or in the country in Kaziranga itself. So the number speaks that we have only about 3,000 to 3,500 animals surviving today of this species. So each and every individual becomes important for the larger survival of the species in future. So that's why we intervene in cases, although floods is a natural phenomenon, but we also intervene in floods, but definitely not in each and every case where the predation happens. Now, we know that the rhino mother and calf is a very close social bond. Rhinos are very solitary, but the mother and calf combination is a very intact combination because they are socially, they live in high tiger density areas, and these calves are vulnerable to predation. And also the adult males, they also do infanticide. So that is why the mothers are very possessive of these young calves. So in that case, how in a flood or otherwise, these calves actually get separated from their mothers. So as you can see the rhino, you can see that the anatomically, the eyes are really, really poor in comparison to the entire animal. Their eyesight is really poor. What is strong is the sense of smell and hearing. So they rely mostly on sense of smell and hearing to survive. So I'm sharing a video where you can see that a rhino calf, it actually hides, a rhino mother actually hides the calf when it goes for foraging on water. And unless and until the mother returns, the calf remains static, silent at that place. That's a anti-predatory strategy for most of the mammals, in our forest. But what you can see in this video is that the mother actually is in front of the calf, but it fails to recognize the calf because it has lost the smell of the calf. So you can see here, the mother is making distress call, terribly confused and lost the smell of the calf, whereas the calf was just in front of her. So that's probably these mother-calf bonds are broken, and the calf are, vulnerable to tigers for predation. So that's how probably they get separated during the floods also, or maybe during failed predation attempts. So when such calves are, located just next to a village, the entire village, the entire community actually, tries to save the calf. So you can see this is a rescue scenario of a rhino calf. You can see the amount of people there. Everybody is trying their hands in saving this calf and, taking it to the rehab facility. So we reciprocate by saving these calves and giving them another opportunity. So on the day of arrival, it is highly stressed because it is separated from their mother. It's been starving for a long time. So this is for intensive care of these kind of calves for us. So I'll share a video again. You can see how confused and how vulnerable these calves are on the day of arrival at our rehab facility. So these calves actually make short squeaks or vocal communication from greater one-horned rhinoceros. There'll be about 20 odd vocal communications still established. So one of them is this squeak by these young calves to locate the mother and try to find security and comfort of its mother. So this is the phase where we do intensive care of these calves. We don't leave the calf alone, and we start feeding them with milk. So once they are stabilized and once they are accepting the milk, we start to put them in a larger enclosure just next to the nurseries. As you can see, we always had at least 2 or 3 calves together at any given point of time. So that gives an opportunity for each of these calves to be with their own species rather than, be habituated to their keepers or their foster parents. We have used the human infant formula mostly for raising rhino calves without much of a difficulty. But these days we are also following skim milk with the addition of glucose, because rhinos' natural milk is really high in sugar, but very, very low in fat. So we don't want the fat content in the human infant formula that is there. So that's why we have switched to skim milk formula these days with the addition of sucrose or glucose into it. We milk feed them till the age of 18 months, and then that is when we wean them at the age of 18 to 24 months from milk. That is a very gradual process again, and at the age of 3 months or so, we start with solid food for these calves. So they grow together in the larger nursery and paddock we have at the rescue facility. And when they are 24 months old, they are almost ready for translocation to a pre-decided release site. So when they are about 24 months or more, we do a thorough disease investigation. We look at their blood profiles, and we also train them so that they can be transported easily with least amount of stress during the travel. In the release site, we make a large, about 0.1 square kilometer of enclosure for their initial acclimatization phase. This is the phase where they are still in confinement within these solar fence enclosure, just to acclimatize them with the natural food they have, completely withdraw the human care they were getting, and we also monitor them for any disease that may have in their body just before release. So this phase is called the acclimatization phase. And once the acclimatization phase is over, we start to open the gates of the larger enclosure so that they have the opportunity to go out and forage naturally in the wild. And once they are released, we do post-release monitoring for at least 24 months. Each of these hand-raised rhinos, or for that matter, any hand-raised animal, large mammal, we put up a radio transmitter in their neck and do post-release monitoring so that the results of our investment can be evaluated. I am sharing a few results that I have of these monitoring process that we had. As you can see, their ranges it varies. If it is a female, it's much lesser. But if it's a male or a male, it's much larger for obvious reasons, because they explore. And if you can see both the maps on the right, you can see there is a core home range and there is a overlapping home range in place, which tends to say that they are using about 5 to 6 square kilometers of core area very frequently, but they also disperse during the process of release. So this is our most significant result that we have got out of these efforts of saving these rescued rhinoceros. My previous speaker, Bibop Talukdar, has already told you that Manas once had about 100 odd population of rhinos, but which has been extirpated during the early 90s, and repopulation of rhinos in Manas was attempted. So one of the first rhino that went to repopulate Manas is from the Center for Wildlife Rehabilitation and Conservation. Until today, we have shifted 21 hand-raised rhinos from CWRC to Manas. And I'm glad to say that, reproduction and survivability are the two key indicators of, their success. They have survived. 12 calves have born in Manas out of these rehabilitated rhinos. And one of the significant proportion of rhinos in Manas is of rehab origin as of today. We also had some challenges because there are adult male rhinos, and these rhino calves are devoid of any maternal security during their earlier phases. So some of them were injured by adult males. We have helped the translocation of 22 wild-to-wild rhinos in Assam under the flagship project of Indian Rhino Vision 2020. So far, the team from Assam has translocated more than 44 rhinos from CWRC or from the wilderness in Povitoria and Kaziranga National Park to Manas National Park without having a single mortality. So this goes to show that the team from Assam is so well skilled and equipped, so well skilled to take care of such kind of stressful exercise in future. The only threat that the greater one-horn rhinoceros still today have, the major threat, is poaching. But as you know that Assam is synonymous to rhinos, everything branded in Assam is branded with a greater one-horn rhinoceros, from our oil companies to the transport companies. So, socially, rhinos are accepted and regarded as the highest level of love and affection. So entire community in Assam is having a great affection towards this species. So the local community becomes the eyes and ears of the enforcing agencies. So as Dr. Talukdar said, that if the land is available and the security is there, then the rhinos will survive and thrive. We have also donated 6 of our rhinos, hand-raised rhinos, to Assam State Zoo for a breeding program that they are undertaking with the request from the Chief Wildlife Warden. So six of them has gone to the Assam State Zoo, 3 of them just recently. And for CWRC, it's an unique opportunity for volunteers, interns who are veterinarians and biologists to work with us, learn hands-on about animal rescue, rehabilitation, and their behavioral observations. So it's a unique opportunity for all the veterinarians, biologists, or anybody who wants to work with us. And we have so far trained more than 100 veterinarians and biologists in our rescue CWRC. So people are welcome to apply for internship or volunteership here. So with that, I thank Central Zoo Authority for organizing this talk. And this is a greater team that we had, all the frontline forest staff and officials from Assam Forest Department, Central Zoo Authority. We are grateful for the entire team for accomplishing what we had with the greater one-horn rhinoceros. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing the outlook, or the outlook of this CWRC and the role it plays in the conservation of rhinos, especially in the Kaziranga landscape. So with this, we'll move on to the question answer session for today's talk. So Dr. Talukdar will take first questions for you. So the first question for you is that efforts in Kaziranga are globally recognized. What measures other than protection are in place for the species across its range, like in Terai and the transboundary areas? If you can elaborate a bit on that.
I think all the rhino-bearing areas protection has been a priority task, and enhancing the capabilities of the frontline staff, with regards to their mobility to enhance vigilance protections has been a priority and has been strengthened in almost all the rhino-bearing areas in its distribution range. But now what I have observed that slowly the management has also realized the need to fight against the invasive, the species which are taking some of the important grassland areas. And we have seen, some interventions already on the way. It's already in parts of Oran, in Manas, also a little bit I have seen in Kaziranga. Habitat management, beyond invasive species, desiltations of wetlands has been done. So I think a combinations of efforts, both ecological and protection, has been addressed and put on the priorities which are needed, and that I think needs periodic management interventions and periodic evaluations, re-evaluations, to ensure that both protection and management of habitat aspects goes side by side.
Right, sir. So in that line, the second question goes like that there are other species also like in the same habitat that share the similar habitat as the rhino. So how does the rhino as a flagship species help in the conservation of others as well?
Okay. I feel because of rhinos, thanks to rhinos, some of the grasslands, species are getting benefited. Beside, the herbivores like hog deers, swamp deers, but I will flag one birds, that is the Bengal florican. Bengal florican in Assam are found mainly in the rhino-bearing areas where grasslands are maintained. So thanks to rhinos, that it has also given, opportunities to other grassland-dependent species to thrive. But of course, rhinos are always getting benefited. Some other species which are getting benefited may not be highlighted, but at least they are getting benefited, and we could see that their population status is stable and increasing in certain parts of Assam.
Right, sir. And so the next question for you is that do rhinos like form family groups, and are they territorial or show site fidelity of sorts?
Well, generally, what I have seen, my friend Bhaskar can add also because he has been, good experience in working in the field. But the rhinos, with mother and I have seen, they can live with another mother and calf, especially in Povitoria, which I have seen. They have little territorial aspect, but it is not that big. But maybe, for the males during the breeding, they are quite ferocious because that is a time where, survival of the fittest theory, is there. So the dominant male always, tries to dominate that area. So in case of male, of course, they have a little bit of, I would say, territorial consciousness is more. With regards to mother and calf, I have seen, especially in Povitoria, also in Kaziranga, I have seen, that they in the same areas, they can live happily. So Bhaskar can add if he has anything more to,
No, I think Bivabda perfectly you are correct. Only the mother and calf, and the only other social association that we have seen is the calf of the previous batch also joins the new mother and calf, and in a territory where there are a lot of tiger density is high, or if the aggression from the dominant male is a imminent threat, then that is why the male calves, especially from the previous batch, also joins the mother and the new calf and forms a small social group just to guard against the male aggression. I think you are correct.
Right. Thank you. So the answer, the last question for you is that how effective has community outreach been in the conservation of the species, and has there been any focused approach used to to spread awareness?
Well, I think this is community approach has been going on for few decades. Just yesterday, I went to Kaziranga to attend the Nature Orientation Initiative. This is a joint, collaborative efforts of the national park authorities and NGOs like WTI, WWF, RNOC, and other NGOs. So that's we brings in the students for 3 days camps and then try to build leadership on them. And some of these students who attends this kind of training becomes volunteers during the flood time, because during the flood time, not only for the rescue, sometimes we need volunteers even to check the speed of the vehicles passing through Kaziranga. So I think that community education awareness approach are going on well. There are eco-development committees which government has formed that provides them some livelihood interventions. So I think there is a long way to go. We need to consolidate whatever steps we have taken so that, community supports is very crucial, in place like Assam, and which has already been gathered, but we need to gather and we need to, strengthen it further.
Right, sir. So those were the questions for you. We now move on to questions for Dr. Bhaskar. So Dr. Bhaskar, the first question for you is that how long does the monitoring period last post-release? And if neck collars are being used for the monitoring process, what happens when the species grows? I mean, when the individual grows?
Can you repeat your question? I think.
Yes. The question is that how long does the monitoring period last post-release? And if neck collars are used for the monitoring process, what happens when the individual grows?
Okay, so our monitoring process actually looks at two key indicators. One is that whether they are able to survive in the wild. And in case they survive, how do they range? Do they find their food because they are hand raised? So these are some of the basic questions that we wanted the answers from. So we obviously went for the VHF transmitters into neck collars. So our monitoring period is essentially till the battery lasts, which is very good for VHF, which is about 48 to 36 months. We have seen. Now, what we have done with the collar is that since they are growing animal, so their neck circumference will definitely grow. More so for the males, they have robust neck circumference. So we always attached a weak link with the neck collars so that with natural wear and tear, it also falls off well before it becomes too tight for the animal. So that is what we have been practicing. Yes.
Right, sir. And so the next question for you is how long does the acclimatization phase last? And what are the indicators that suggest, are there any indicators that suggest that you use that the rhino is fit to really be released now?
The acclimatization phase, basically, we want to see that whether they can survive with the how they cope with the new environment, with the new food and the new conditions, new climatic condition, new soil conditions as well. We also monitor their parasitic load. Parasitic load, not because just to know what parasites are there, but just to see that whether their parasitic load is increasing or decreasing, which will indicate that they are having difficulty in adapting to the new situation. So earlier in the initial phases, we thought that we will keep them for a very long time because we were not sure whether they are actually ready for release or not. So we kept them for more than 24 months, but gradually as we did the exercise, we realized that even 6 to 12 months is more than enough to make them acclimatize with the new environment, because it's a distance of only 500 kilometers, and although habitat is not exactly similar, but more or less the same similar kind of habitat is there.
Right, sir. And so the last question for you is that what is the biggest challenge that you face as for rehabilitation in terms of all megafauna that you enter in Kaziranga?
I think if we sum up, the aggression of the dominant males towards the young calves is been a challenge. We have lost about 5 calves of aggression, which is basically because these hand-raised calves doesn't have the maternal security to cover them against the adult males, aggressive males. So we have lost calves of both sexes, not only males but also females. So that's why we have slightly increased our acclimatization phase during the last batch of rhinos, which is about 12 months. So that is the most challenging phase for us during the entire rehabilitation process.
Right, sir. So those were the questions for you. And with this, we come to an end to our 53rd Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo Talk. So on behalf of the Central Zoo Authority, I would like to thank both Dr. Tarabdar and to you, Dr. Chaudhary, for joining us, for taking time out of your schedule and joining us for this talk. And I would also like to thank the audience who have been patient with us throughout for this talk, and also inform them that we will be back next Wednesday with a week 54 species in focus, which is the red panda, and zoo in focus is the Padmaja Naidu Himalayan Zoological Park. So do tune in for that talk also next Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. And the Center for Wildlife Rehabilitation and Conservation will be continuing the outreach activities till the end of this week. So if you are part of it, do tune in for the talks, which are the other talks which are scheduled for this week. And with that, I would like to conclude today's session. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you.